It's a beautiful day in Tampa Bay for Hump Day, Wednesday, February 6, 2019, the only 2/6/2019 in the history of humanity. You know what, O?
What, Glenn?
Let us continue
To choose
on purpose
with a purpose.
to give a great hump.
day.
I was going to say humper.
Ooh, all right.
Great humper.
I don't need a reminder to give those. Boom.
Sex in the pews. Sex in the pews. Sex in the pews.
Sex in the pew.
Greetings, you beautiful humans. This is Glenn Klein.
And Owen Pratt.
Welcome in the pews for another excursion into Sex in the Pews. Organized fun with a boner. Organized fun with a purpose. And the new jingle from Reaction Productions out of Atlanta, Georgia. The very talented and gorgeous and smart and genius and funny as fuck daughter of mine, Hannah Joy Klein. Oh, no, Hannah Joy Olson Klein Chiclana. And her very sexy husband, Angel Gabriel Chiclana.
Great musician.
We talked about on a previous show, I think it was with Dina, we talked about on a previous show how the initial chant wasn't exactly what we wanted. But it was good. It just wasn't the intonation we wanted. And then so they had a bunch of their actor and performing friends over for a party, as they will, in the Hotlanta. And I said, could you get the group together? And Angel, I don't know if it was Angel and Hannah or a combination thereof, came up with that slow but sure lead up to Sex in the Pews. Because it's supposed to, and it does, juxtapose that sort of militaristic, aggressive approach to Sex in the Pews, and then it dovetails into that jazzy vocal that both Angel, that was Angel, and Hannah do, and then you schmaltzed it up with your
Threw a little schmaltz on there.
with a little electric guitar, and yeah, dude,
Wow.
yeah, that's badass right there. That was fun, I bet, doing that.
It was fun.
It's always fun doing something that you love for a living.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest keys to success.
Major key.
And I have been sharing that with my 6 youngsters who are now all grown adults since day one. In fact, Hannah had me come and speak on a professional day, when the mom or dad comes and talks about their profession. And I don't remember what I was doing exactly at the time. I think I might have been doing radio and life coaching. I think maybe also the Sunbar Tanning Saloon. I was busy. I was dual tasking in a major way. But I presented before these 7th graders that lesson. Whatever you guys do, a key to success is do what you're passionate about, what you have passion for. And all the 12 and 13-year-old little prepubescent kids, oh, he said passion. The times have changed.
I was going to say that.
But that did happen. It was like, ooh, your dad said passion.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Different times.
It's amazing what kind of personalities are drawn to certain professions. What we're all about on the show is releasing people in freedom,
Right.
in all ways, but especially about their attitudes and proclivities towards their sexual experience. But life is about control, unfortunately, because one of the most human characteristics, of course, is we all want what we cannot have. It's like the grass is greener on the other side syndrome. At least subconsciously, we all know that we have no control, relatively speaking.
Right.
We don't control who we're born to, when we're born, what sex we're born, what body type we have. How tall are you?
6'4".
How much did you pray to become 6'4"?
I prayed so hard.
Hard.
I ate a lot of spinach.
Yeah. What color are your eyes?
Blue, green.
Yeah, blue. Kind of hazelish.
They've been really blue lately. It changed with my mood, and when they've been blue at positive, I've just been noticing the blueness in my eyes. I don't know if this makes good radio or not, but
Well, if people go to the Owen Pratt or the sexinthepews.com website,
check me out, Owen in the Pews on Instagram.
Although I think the picture on the sexinthepews.com is a black and white picture. But nonetheless, yeah, they're dreamy. They're definitely dreamy. What'd you do for those blue eyes? Nothing. Holly and John are your parents.
Yes, they are.
What did you do to be born to them? How much control did you have over that one?
Zero.
the most important things that happen to us, what time of history we're born in. I'm glad to be born where we can have podcasts versus how am I going to get to work in my horse and buggy? Or how am I going to plow the fields when it's freaking cold outside?
Or how am I going to survive the Black Plague?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's an old goodie. So at least subconsciously we understand we don't have any control. So we want what we can't have, and we seek it wherever we can find it to control and be controlled. But also genetically, something that has to be overcome on purpose. Certain personality types are drawn towards professions. They find it passionate to control other people or to be controlled. That's why people are drawn to, the clergy.
It's interesting. I think this goes into your point about the pendulum swinging of history, where, especially in regards to the gender roles, where women forever got maybe the shorter end of the stick, and as far as the control goes,
got shafted, we could say, perhaps.
Perhaps. But now, as the pendulum is swinging the other way, we're seeing women with more and more control and taking higher positions and being boss ass bitches and doing all these amazing things and rising in the political enterprise. Across all situations, women are really getting more control.
They are, and they've always had a level of control from the Garden of Eden, if the story is accurate, and even if it's not, it is instructive. Mm-hmm. It's called the power of the pussy. And that is, even while women were downgraded or downtrodden and treated like men's property, they still have that power. And to the degree that they would exercise it would be to the degree that men would be challenged. But now men are really challenged. And women not only are gaining economically and societal power, but also they still have the power of the pussy. Don't tell them. They know. Other professions, people are drawn to control and to be controlled. Military, law enforcement, politics. I mean, we have the White House, the current White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is President Donald J. Trump press secretary. And her father was governor and is Governor Mike Huckabee of Arkansas. And guess what? Governor
Huckabee, for that guy when I was a Christian.
Yeah, Governor Huckabee was a Baptist minister. And so he goes from the religion into the government. And where does his daughter gravitate towards? The government. Controlling information. Some people would say controlling, releasing the truth. You can't handle the truth.
People that are drawn towards law enforcement.
Yeah. Camp directing. It's the most control job there is, resident camp directing. That's what I did. I'm a reform control freak. I know that it's...
Reformed is a strong word.
Why? Well, you said that the last time I brought this up. What do you mean by that?
I mean, recovering maybe more appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not a control freak anymore.
Okay, all right. I guess I didn't know.
It doesn't mean that I'm not fulfilling my passion to help people and to coach, and I don't say shit to people, that, generally speaking, unless they ask for my opinion anymore. Used to be, I used to impose my opinion on people, whether it be at the summer camp or when I was a minister or a father. And fortunately, I had a loving soul. Otherwise, that can be heinous when you're with a superb control freak. Dawn's the same way. She isn't a control freak extraordinaire, the mother of my 6 children. But she's got a great soul, so it worked out pretty well. But I don't want to control people anymore. I have enough time dealing with my shit. Now, if somebody puts themselves in a relational position with me where they want the coaching, I bring it because I'm good at it. And then they respond to it and they benefit from it. People that are listening to us on the podcast, nobody's putting a freaking gun to their head and saying, listen to these knuckleheads. No, you're doing that out of your freedom of choice. It's beautiful freedom. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders said the other day in an interview with the Christian Broadcasting Network, the Vakakta Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, Pat Robertson's outfit. You know what Vakakta means? Mm-mm. It's Jewish for nuts, crazy. Vakakta. Say that.
Vakakta.
Yeah, you've picked up on the Jewish and the Yiddish very. You got down l'chaim like immediately.
I have a tendency. I'm good at picking up sounds and languages.
Right on.
I don't remember them well, but I get good pronunciation.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders contended, and interviewing on CBN, that God had placed Donald J. Trump in the position that he now holds as president of the United States of America. And that is fucked up.
That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why it's fucked up, ladies and gentlemen.
I wonder if she thinks that God put Bill Crosby's penis inside of those women.
That would be a very good question to ask at the next White House press briefing. So, Madam Secretary, if God put Donald J. Trump in the White House, did he impose Bill Cosby's penis into the women that he's now in jail for? Or did God put the roofies in their drinks? Make sure that he inspired Bill Cosby to drug these young women and to molest them and rape them. That's
another day in Sex in the Pews here.
That's a whole bunch of awful thoughts right in a row. No, you guys, see, this is the problem amongst millions with Christianity. They didn't come over to the light side. They're still in the dark side of the Old Testament. They still think God's doing shit like that. God used to do stuff like that. He also once created a universe. He once planted the earth on its axis. I don't think he's doing that anymore. It's done. Oh, we can move God with our prayers. Prayers work. Prayers are so important. There is not one Christian prayer warrior that has ever gotten on his or her knees in the morning and said this prayer. Father God, in the name of Jesus, I pray, I plead, I implore you to keep the earth rotating on its axis. Because, Lord, I realize that if the earth comes off just slightly off the axis, we will go flying off into space, and then nothing will make a difference, and we'll all go to hell in a handbasket. In the name of Jesus, amen. No, nobody ever prayed that prayer. Why? Because it's nonsensical. It's done. We can see it's done. It is obvious. If God was intervening in human affairs before the completion of the Jewish prophecies at Golgotha in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, if he was, I think he was, he switched it up. He went from being in heaven to earth. He went from living outside of humanity to, on his own volition, his own will, to live inside the temples of the Holy Spirit, the temple of the Spirit. Each human being, everybody. If you're listening to the show, and obviously you are, or how would you know that I just said that? you got God living inside of you, people. You're perfect and righteous and sinless and without blame. That's God just chose to make us that way.
You can't masturbate him out of you.
You can't even say something as absurd on this side of the life and death and burial and resurrection of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, the Messiah. You can't even say something as absurd as Sarah Huckabee Sanders said and not be considered perfect and righteous. Everybody. Well, everybody? Yeah, everybody. It's called being one. With what? With whom? God and everybody. Yeah. No division, no divisiveness. The Apostle Paul was the first one that said, there's no male or female anymore. What a concept.
No bond or free. No slave or free man.
Yeah. No Jew or non-Jew. Those are the only...
No believer, no non-believer.
No anything.
Black, white,
It's just what we're left with is God.
No conservative, no liberal.
Beautiful humans, look at the person that's closest to you, or the next time you see a person, as I'm looking at the very handsome Theodore Owen Pratt, I'm looking at God in the flesh. Has infused...
Feast your eyes, bitches.
As infused with the Spirit as Yeshua was, Joshua, Jesus himself. That's what we think. We may be wrong. We may be right. I may be crazy. Who did that song?
I have no idea.
Billy Joel.
But you know what's great?
What?
Is that we may be right, we may be wrong, but even if we are wrong, there's no eternal consequence for it.
Yeah. The judgment was paid. There's no end times. We're not in the end times. The end times were 2,000 years ago. It was the end of the way God was dealing with humanity.
The end of the Jewish era.
It was the Old Testament. It was an old economy. It's different.
There's no end of the world. The end of the world, the word that was translated world that Christians take to mean the end times and the apocalypse, was actually meant a Jewish era that Christ, when he was crucified, ended. He ended the world.
That existed.
That existed, the Jewish era. There's 4 different words that are translated into world. Cosmos, Aeon, which is the age, the Jewish age. Cosmos being the universe. There was another one that means the Roman Empire. So that when the Christians will say, or it's when the gospel reaches the ends of the earth, then you'll know that the world is coming to an end. And it's the word, the ends of the world, the ends of the earth was the Roman area, the Roman Empire, and the gospel. The news of Jesus had reached the extent of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And by that time, they were coming to get Jesus, and they got him, and they killed him, ending the world, the Jewish era. There's no, even the idea of the second coming of Christ. He already came back once. He's already been back. He rose from the dead. Yeah. There's no third coming. Like, was the second time not good enough for you?
Have you ever had a third coming?
Bitches, and that's what we're here to do on Sex in the Pews.
Just demystify the whole fucking thing on purpose, with a purpose. No, it was fucked up. I mean, from the get-go, they got his name wrong. His name's not Jesus of Zeus, Jesus. It's Yeshua. In Hebrew, Joshua. It means salvation. What a good name for a savior. And when Owen says the end of the Jewish era, he didn't mean the end of a Jewish identity. Obviously, that hasn't happened. But what it does mean is that God decided that his unique relationship with Israel had served its purpose. And the purpose of Israel was to show the planet forever, for eternity, that lining up with rules and principles and holidays and regulations and prayers and worshiping to earn your way with God don't work. It doesn't work. It's really ineffective. The God that said, "Thou shalt not kill," saw the Israelite people finally end up offering their children to the Greek god Baal and Moloch in a place called Golgotha. Golgotha is one of the words that is, not Golgotha, Gehinnom in Hebrew. Gehenna. Gehenna is one of the words that is translated hell. I've been to hell. I've been to Gehenna.
And back.
It's a very pleasant place, right? It's outside the old city of Jerusalem. It's a park right now.
Sounds lovely.
But they were offering their children in human sacrifice. And then in the time of Christ and the disciples, Gehenna, Gehinnom, was the city garbage dump. So when Yeshua warned the religious leaders that, like, guys, listen, Rome's coming. They're going to circle this city. And if you guys don't get the hell out, you're going to end up in hell, in Gehinnom, Gehenna, and you're going to be slaughtered, and your bodies are going to burn with everlasting fire.
Guess what happened?
Some of them got out. Some of them went and endured till the end. That's what he was talking about. Those that shall endure to the end shall be saved. We want to spiritualize that. No. It's like, get out during the ransacking of Jerusalem and you will not die. Jesus wasn't only the Mashiach, the anointed one. He was a prophet. He knew what was up. He was gifted that way. And so, but a lot of the religious leaders stayed, and the Roman soldiers gathered them in an ultimate sign of disrespect for Israel and the Jewish people. They slaughtered them, and they threw them in the garbage dump.
The everlasting fire.
And that's how they used to get rid of the fire in ancient Jerusalem, which we still do. That fire never went out. They just burned the garbage. There is no hell. There's 55 words in the King James Bible that are translated H-E double hockey sticks. Not one of them means a place where people go that displease God. You can't displease God anymore, you guys. Not possible. Not by your choice, not by your faith or lack of faith. Not by your masturbatory habits or not, or your thoughts. Joshua said that if you even look after a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. Either God in the flesh was saying, I'm up in the ante now. You thought if you just didn't put tab A in the slot B that you were good to go, as long as it was your wife that you were having sexual relations with that woman. But no, he was either up in the ante saying, if you even think about it, you might as well have committed adultery. Or God in the flesh was saying, listen, I know how I made you. I had made men to be stimulated by the visual because they're out there, just like their sex organs. I made women be generally turned on by the emotional, the internal, because that's how I did it.
So why does all this matter? Why are we talking about all this Jesus stuff in 2019, Glenn? What does this religious thing have to do with sexuality?
What do you think, Theodore?
I think that the message that was attempted to be communicated by Paul was actually twisted by James, Peter, and John and turned into the religious institution that we know of today as the church, which in itself is a lie because the whole planet is the church by definition of the scripture.
Yes.
And then this institution has come and controlled people, and mainly through their money and their sexuality, and told them that if they don't get married and have sex outside of marriage, that they're going to burn in hell. And so,
even if you think about having sex outside,
so you got to
marriage.
pray and confess, and because it makes them more money to get more marriages and have more babies, and
the divorce industry is right in there too.
boom.
Wedding industry, $1 billion industry. Divorce industry, $1 billion industry.
Mm-hmm. All at the price of human sexual freedom.
And we know that sexual freedom, being responsible, mature, sexually liberated adults,
Safe, healthy.
yeah, all that stuff. And we're not judging, as long as you don't impose your sexuality physically or emotionally on somebody else. We're not judging what you do, where you put tab A in a slot B or whatever. We have a show that we did last week with the wonderful Kelly Elizabeth Goss. She was part of a throuple. Raised Southern Baptist, and she was the third member with a husband and wife for years.
If any ladies out there want to be in a throuple, my Instagram is Owen at Sex in the Pews.
All we want to do, our heart, is to see people be free. Free what? To be passionate about what they're wanting and to fulfill their lives, and to be not be so consternated and constricted and constipated, and the bitterness, the self-loathing that causes arthritis and brain tumors and cancers and hatred towards their fellow men and women. Ugh. But it all stems from a understanding of the history of sexual repression in this country, which comes from Christianity, and the history of how Christianity fucked it up. And that'll do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. No, we're just getting kicked in. We want to encourage you to go to sexinthepews.com, subscribe.
We love the rates and reviews and subscriptions on iTunes, Apple. We're also on Spotify, YouTube. Check out the promotional videos. Instagram, we're on Sex in the Pews.
And share it with your friends who know that they would laugh, they would be provoked, they would be pissed, they would be turned on. If you want to share blessing and be a true dick in the earth, which is to give life and pleasure, or to be a wonderful cunt, which is to release life and pleasure. I'm lopping on cunt. Michelle told me.
We got to redeem the word cunt.
She said she loves the word cunt. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Here are the two sex organs that produce pleasure in life, and it's like the worst thing you could say to a person. That guy's a dick. That guy's she's a cunt. Fuck that. Our special guest today knows of whence we came. She is absolutely part of our story, and we are honored to have Cathy Taylor on with us. She holds a bachelor's degree in interpersonal communications with a health emphasis and a master's degree in corporate communications, specializing in productive and effective end-of-life messages. She does corporate training, public speaking. She's written books, and are a few of her current endeavors. She's been a pastor for over 20 years and held church in various unorthodox places, such as a local pub for almost a decade. Her Red Door Bar had gained national attention in 2009 and allowed Cathy to be a guest on several national fronts with her inclusive approach as, quote, come as you are. She is in the great state of Wisconsin. I was honored to attend the Red Door Church. Please welcome in the pews, Cathy Taylor. Hello, Cathy.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Cathy, we have no complaints, but thank you for caring enough to ask. How are you?
I am good. I've been listening to your intro.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say one quick thing about the end times you jarred me with. Can I say it?
Please.
Freedom.
I remember, I'm 55, okay, so I'm old, but I remember as a kid growing up in The Thief in the Night, all those things, right? Like the Rapture teachings and the scary movie. Did you see Thief in the Night, Glenn?
I did not. Why don't you explain to the beautiful humans that have no idea what a thief in the night reference is about, or what the way it was taught to us in religion is all about, first of all?
All right. So Thief in the Night was this like Hollywood type movie where the rapture occurs. And I don't know who put it out. It was some Christian syndicate or whatever. And the rapture occurred. So the people in the airplane, the pilot was a Christian. So the people die. And it's this horrible, like horrific view of the rapture scenario. And then it leaves you worried, like, oh my God, at the end, what if that's me? And if you die tonight, blah, 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 let's escape this horror, right? So I remember feeling so compelled as a child because I was probably like 14. And I think it was even rated like PG or close to R or something back in the day. And I think to get the ratings. But I remember it scared me so much. I had an end times list. So I had a group of like five.
Kind of like a bucket list for the end time?
Well, no. It's like 5 people that I absolutely knew were holier than me. And so if they were gone and I couldn't find these people at any one given time, I probably was fucked.
Wow.
And I remember my mom never
ranking,
allowing me like to watch soap operas growing up, although she would watch them in front of her ironing board in the basement and turn them off when I came. So I got married at a very young age. And I remember the first thing I wanted to do, I got married at 17. I graduated from high school, got married. And I right away got addicted to Young and the Restless. The whole time knowing in the back of my mind that if Jesus came between 11 and 12, Monday through Friday, okay, I was going to not go in the rapture and I would be giving up my salvation for Victor Newman. Okay.
Wow.
Who still looks the same, by the way. I don't know how the hell that happens.
Could be worse.
Yeah. Crazy, right? So I remember living with that really big fear in my life.
Good times. For the beautiful humans out there that don't know what the rapture is, you may have heard of the term, but the concept comes from one verse in the New Testament writings. It's called, the word rapture never appears in the New Testament writings. But there's a misinterpreted, ridiculous misinterpretation of a phrase called being taken away. And the rapture is just basically the same concept, or that concept for Pentecostalism or end times theology came from a guy named John Darby. And it literally was called in the 19th century Darbyism. That same time, Jehovah's Witness started, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons started, and Darbyism started. And it made its way all the way through most evangelical Christians, and to the point now where, I mean, even people who believe that, don't believe in God, believe that we're in the end times because of climate change. The planet's not going anywhere. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be good to the planet. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be good to each other. But literally, we were concerned that this taking away, it was like, beam me up Scotty from Star Trek. And
Totally.
And you talk about an absurdity. Now, could something of that like that have happened in the Old Testament, in the old way God did shit? He did way crazier shit than that. But that's why it's so messed up to be judging God in this part of history with what was going on before. And it's why it is super ridiculous to think that God is still doing stuff like that when he's not doing anything anymore except residing in every human heart. When people ask me, do you pray? I say, well, I pray thankfully. I'm just thankful. I utter prayer. I utter an affirmation. I utter the reality of our oneness with the rest of the planet and with God. That brings light to my soul, if you will. But I know that God's not going to choose one person's house in a hurricane over another. He's just not going to do it.
Or one president over the other.
Or, one rape scene over another.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. In 2019, I still think it's logical to believe in a creator, but it's absolutely bizarre. I mean, like if you were in a bar, if you might have been even in the Red Door bar, if the rapture would. I remember friends of mine, Tim Gaffney and Evelyn Gaffney, we started a church in Eagle River, and this is obviously many moons ago, and Tim was waiting for Evelyn to get home for the grocery store, and it was dead of winter. Hold on for 1 second.
Bless you.
I receive your blessing. We have taken the Seinfeld after cough or after blessing follow instead of God bless you or bless you. Seinfeld said we should all say, God, you're good looking. So we've embraced.
All right, Glenn, next time.
Yes,
I got you.
and see, you won't go to hell for lying, even, Cathy. So
No, absolutely.
that's a good thing. So Tim comes out expecting his wife, he saw pull into the snow-driven driveway, to be there. He got to the car door was open, no Evelyn. His first thought was, I missed the rapture.
Yeah.
But Evelyn had just walked down to close the door on the barn or something. I don't know. I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah, that would have totally been my first thought.
But this religion that thank God we escaped from, Cathy, is fear and judgment and condemning based.
Amen.
How did you get out of it?
Wow, it was such a journey out. I remember, of course, our friend Mike Williams was one of the first people to introduce the idea that legalism was a mental illness to me, and it made people crazy and self-absorbed and insane. And I began to recognize that, and that was back in the 80s. So I'm proud of myself for that. Sort of.
How would you define legalism?
Basically thinking you have to kiss God's ass. You have to do or work hard, and I had worked so hard my whole life up to that point. From a very little girl, I walked the aisle at 5 at a Lindstrom Crusade, at 6 at the Rock County Fair, at 7, at 8, just in case it didn't take the year before.
You mean to say the sinner's prayer, the classic?
Oh yeah, did the altar call thing. Because what if I sinned as a 7-year-old more, and then as an 8-year-old, okay, I got to redo it. And I remember worrying that the rapture would come, but praying at different times in my life. I remember you always want to be 13 when you're a teenager. Did you guys ever want to be 13? You want to be 13, 16, and 18,
Hell yeah.
in my opinion.
I mean,
I remember,
in Jewish circles, your bar bat mitzvah at 13. You get the big party, and here come all the big bucks.
Right.
Not
so
$1 million bucks, $1 million bucks.
So I remember the night before I was 13, praying that God wouldn't come back during that night because I wanted to experience being 13. Then I remember praying that the night before I got married because I hadn't had sexual intercourse. So I was like, oh God, I want to be able to have sex before you come back. So I literally wasted prayer time about that.
Cathy, is what you're saying is you wanted to come before Jesus came?
Well, no, I'm just before Jesus came. No.
Don't women always want to be the first one coming?
No, I mean, I wanted to, you know what I mean. Shut up. Anyway, so then I remember when I had babies, I wanted to see that baby before the rapture came. It was part of my narrative that had been instilled in me from a child until later. And then I remember, I've heard thousands of sermons, lived in Tulsa, where God lives, and every nut, fruit, and flake, granola capital of the world. But I remember hearing Malcolm Smith. Are you familiar with Malcolm Smith?
I am.
Teach on the covenant. And
where was he? I think he was from England, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Great. When you have a British accent, it sounds so much more authoritative.
Yeah, that's always sexy. And you definitely sound more authoritarian.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I drank a little today. I normally don't day drink, but I was nervous.
You better hope the rapture doesn't come today, goddammit.
I know. Or I am so screwed. But anyway, Malcolm taught on the covenant, and it was incredible. And to this day, the story of Mephibosheth that he laid out and how Mephibosheth had been taught that God was his enemy, that David was his enemy, and having taught all these lies about David and these stories about David, how he'd killed people and was against this one and conquered this and destroyed that. And then David's army comes for him and the foreboding he felt. And he brings him to David and he expects his head to be chopped off. And instead, David said, wow, this is the son of my brother. I put on him the royal robe and feed him. And basically because David and Mephibosheth had a covenant, God and Jesus had a covenant. And because I'm in Jesus, I'm totally good with God.
Yes.
And that began the whole thing. And I began to look at the world as people who see God. They've been lied to about God. They've been heard how he's killed and dominated and, took over things and destroyed. And in essence, he just wants to feed them and put a royal robe on them, And I began to change the way I looked at things. I was a part of the charismatic word of faith movement. I've been blown on. I've been, karate chopped in the spirit. all that stuff. Bullshit.
What do you mean blown on?
Like, when you blow on the crowd and they all fall over.
No,
I don't mean it in a sexual way.
I haven't been part of that one.
Right? Blown by Benny, I think they called it. Right?
Been
blown
slain
by
in the spirit, though.
Benny Hinn. I participated in that too, and then I did it. I mean, I literally was ministering that way. One time
Sure.
I was ministering in Wausau, Wisconsin, and I got done with my message. And I mean, we were tongue. You'll hear us have fun with tongues here on the show. That's what we're doing. We're just having fun with it. But that's faith, believing, healing, prosperity, perfect marriages, perfect kids, all that bullshit. And and so at the end of the message, I just felt like I took a page out of Paul. There's a story in the New Testament writings where Paul anointed a handkerchief, a cloth. And so I prayed over it, and I said, if you want to be touched by God, get up here.
Oh, my God, Glenn, did you do that?
And, dude, I just threw out that handkerchief, and 30 or 40 people fell over like cordwood. I mean, no catchers. But see, then I thought to myself later on, after we got out of this horse shit, I thought to myself, what was that? What was going? I saw those people cracking up and shaking, and it was hypnosis. It was group hypnosis.
Yeah.
It was suggestive hypnosis. And let me tell you something: the human mind can do some crazy ass shit. And that's
I've been a part of all that, and I remember being in camp meeting in Tulsa where Kenneth Hagin was teaching.
Kenneth Hagin.
And 25,000 freaking people smelled roses because he said, "Do you smell the roses?" And I looked in the camp meeting. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, the roses!" And I didn't. Okay. I walked out in the lobby and I was thinking, what the hell is wrong with me? 25,000 people can't be wrong. I'm wrong. I don't smell the roses. It's me. And I look back in that, and that is like so sad. But interestingly, about the falling over stuff, I mean, I had my boys touch somebody who had the stigmata. I've seen people, the gold dust, all this stuff, karate chops in the spirit. Everything weird. It was a part of my everyday life.
What's the stigmata?
However, I saw once, my oldest son is an atheist, and he said, Mom, please watch this show.
Kath, hold on for a second, because Owen's got a question, and I know the answer, but a lot of people don't, and that we listen for the listeners, so hold on for a second.
What is it? What's the stigmata and the gold dust thing?
Oh, I'm sorry, honey. The stigmata was when somebody would show on their body supernaturally the stripes on the back or wounds in their hands and feet.
Real blood sometimes.
Yep. What? And there was a woman in Tulsa. This is an interesting story. It was at the Mabee Center. In the front row were all these big players, right? You're talking like Richard Roberts, whatever, Oral Roberts, Higgins, all these people.
Our guy, Carlton Pearson.
Probably at that point. He was my pastor for a while. Yep. So anyway, they were in the front row, and this woman came out because she was working with T.L. Osborne, who was a world famous evangelist missionary. Another whack job. And he was advocating her. So I'm sure he vetted her in their minds, right? If TL believes it. But Willie George, who was Gospel Bill at the time when my boys watched, it was like a children's show. He and Charles Capps didn't feel right about it. And they were videotaping this woman, and she was showing Owen the stigmata. She had stripes on her back. She lifted up the back of her shirt discreetly, of course. And then she had blood, oil oozing out of her hands. And you could go up and touch her. So I remember having my boys touch her, thinking they would be blessed and anointed by her. But in the back room, Charles Capps and Willie George were slow. Oh, I know. She also had feathers come out of her hand, like duck feathers. Now, looking back, why the fuck didn't I think God isn't a duck? Okay. But
where did the feathers come from?
So Willie George and them unveiled that she was pulling them out of her shirt and that she was a fraud. Well, of course she was a fraud, but nobody else had gotten that. You know what I mean? We were all stupid. But I wonder too, how could that not be real? I've been a part of the laughing revival where everybody laughs. Have you ever seen that, Owen?
Like they're drunk.
Everybody is drunk in the spirit, laying on the floor, laughing their ass off for hours.
Sounds like a good time.
It was.
Hundreds of people. Oh yeah, it's fun. It was fun.
Rodney Howard Brown was a huge.
I was I was a part of his original meetings in Florida when he first came.
Right. Started in Lakeland at a dead Assemblies of God church, packed the place out, pastors coming from all over the state, then all over the country, promising that he would never start his own church.
Before that, Glenn, he was a part of my side of Florida and just had a little tent set up before he got to Lakeland.
If you drive down 75 now, Owen.
Three churches were destroyed by his ministry.
If you drive down 75 north from where we're at right now, you go right past Rodney Howard Brown's church that he promised that he would never start. But the gold dust is the same thing, like the roses. It's just like you would see gold dust just drifting down from heaven.
Oh, I've heard of that one before.
I remember an amazing service that I conducted was when I encouraged everybody to smell the cocaine. And that,
are you serious?
No, but it was a joke.
That would be
I was
fun.
going to say that was a hell of a service.
I've never done that, but I heard that if I did, I would.
Well, no,
Anyway, I didn't say it. Can you edit that?
The local Shoney's and the Golden Corral after that service, the cocaine service, they were not happy with me because nobody went out for lunch after the service.
All right, we're not advocating cocaine use. However, oh shoot, you got me.
Well, that's cool. We'll reset. It's a good time to reset. She's Cathy Taylor. She's from the great state of Wisconsin. She had a Red Door bar church that I went to with Michael L. Williams, and we drank. And I think I was smoking at the time and had a cigarette.
Yeah, you could smoke in there.
And listen to Mike with his vodka cran share an amazing gospel.
That's what
story.
I was serving him when I met him at the restaurant.
She's been doing this for 20 years and more. She appears all over the country, including on our new friend David C. Smalley's podcast called Dogma Debate, where David was a former Christian and now an atheist, and he has folks on. We had a great time with David. You can hear that program. I think it's number 8.
Episode 7.
Episode 8.
8.
Yes. So other than fear of not seeing your kids born or not being married or et cetera, how else did your Christian experience adversely affect you, Cathy? You got married at 17? Did you have boyfriends? Were you a virgin at marriage?
I was a virgin when I got married. I only had like one official boyfriend. I had little crushes and stuff and little secret kisses in hallways and things like that. But I had a real problem with sexual things because I was sexually abused as a young girl. Not a one-time thing, like, without being too graphic. I probably, in my memory, in my recollection, in my experience, okay, I remember it to be pretty much every school day for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. My mail's coming.
Well, and your dog was upset by that story too. God,
yeah, I know. My dog was traumatized. He loves me. And never, completely raped or anything like that, but definitely other stuff. And I remember it developed in me such a shame and a confusion. But the worst thing it did to me was it taught me something. It taught me a way to live my life that was very dysfunctional. And I remember being in marriage counseling with my first husband of 30 years. And the therapist said, Cathy, I want you to close your eyes and think about being sexually abused as a young girl. And I'm thinking, oh God, it's one of those repeat your memories things, see Jesus there. But it wasn't. He said, I want you to identify the lie that you believed about yourself at that point. And I swear, guys, it was like a neon sign. The lie was, you are responsible for everyone else's happiness. That's what it taught me the worst. And you'd say, well, why would it teach you that? Well, I had to be quiet, make sure my, the person abusing me was quiet because my brother was right next door and he wouldn't understand. He would be confused. My mother was across the hallway. She would hate me. I could never tell my father, who adored me, because he would kill the man and then I would lose my dad too. And he'd go to prison. I can't tell anybody because they'll think I'm terrible. I have to maintain this really good girl facade. So I was a pretty perfect child on the outside. I was the kind of girl that your friends' parents would say, oh, I wish you could be like Cathy, or have Cathy over, or, we love Cathy. I got all the awards for the, being the best girl and the most happy. And But inside, I was a mess. I'm sorry. Were you there?
Yeah, I mean, that just sucks that happened to you.
And so then when I was 16, I remember I finally got to go live with my dad, and it was just a beautiful thing. I was freedom. And I met my husband to be like 2 weeks after I moved there. And I knew it was my husband. And it was really weird. I know it sounds crazy. I was getting ready to be a senior in high school. I went to school early, so I was young. And I look back, I would have to do it the same way. I genuinely loved him. He saved my life in many ways. I think I would have gravitated towards a really toxic kind of person with some of the issues I had. And I guess in that weird way, religion saved me at that point a little bit, because my husband was a Christian. His family was serving God, and they came to help my dad's ministry. So we entered the ministry very young age, and went to Bible school in Tulsa and blah, 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 and raised our children. I was a very young mom at 18 and lived this pretty great life where I was very moral in the fact that I took it seriously when Jesus said, if you even think of a woman, and instead of really seeing it as Jesus leveling the playing field, which I know that was his purpose for saying that, I saw it as like, don't even fantasize about Johnny Depp. Okay.
Oh, my God.
That would be like
that sucks.
Johnny
to
Depp.
not be
That would
able
be
to
bad.
fantasize about Johnny Depp.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
I was
the
that
height
faithful
of
of a person
slavery
because
right there.
I had to be. And then, can I tell you what happened to me? I played this game, and then I got into grace, the grace message, more with Mike. Bob Yandian was my pastor for 3 years. And I started to let myself breathe a little. And I see this happens with people when they get in the grace message. It's a criticism that you start to sin or whatever. But I think what it is you just start to breathe and be a human and let yourself be that way. But I remember I went through a lot of traumatic experiences, and my husband and I were on the same page, and we were believing God for a lot of things, and went through the whole Word of Faith crash. We rejected that message. We're right along with Mike when he came out of the Word of Faith message. Had him at our local area church, and he stayed with my dad, and blah, blah, blah. We go way back.
Can you tell that story of how Mike and who Mike is to you, and what your experience with him was, and how it affected your spirituality?
Yeah. Mike really saved my life in many ways. Him and several of our friends. Well, I actually remember Mike from the beginning. Okay. I was there the night of the satellite revival, the Bob Tilton satellite revival in our little church in Janesville called Believers Faith Fellowship that my husband and I had helped start. I think I was 21. My husband was 22. We were the children's pastors, and we were a part of the Success in Life 4-night a month, whatever. Well, that group had a satellite revival. So you would go to watch TV, the satellite at night, and it was in Texas. And there was a revival that just had sparked, and it was in like 90 days. And I don't know if I was halfway through it, but I remember the night Norval Hayes brought up this young man who was beautiful and talented and gifted in speaking. It was so obvious. You know how like Barack Obama is like an orator, no matter how you feel about him, he's classy, he's got it, and that's how I felt about Mike. And Norval brings up this young man who got delivered from homosexuality and blah, blah, blah. And that was the beginning of Mike's road, from what I understand, unless I'm wrong, as far as public persona. And I followed him through all the years when he was really big, where I never would have had a chance to meet him. I saw him at many churches where there was 5,000-6,000 people. Then he came out of that Word of Faith, was the poster boy who, rejects that. And ironically, my father and his wife, who's dead now, but they embraced Mike. And they had always had a poor street ministry, homeless shelter. And when I was in the Word of Faith movement, I used to feel sorry for them. Like they didn't believe God enough. They didn't know the word. They could be victorious. I'm very ashamed that
that was a example of how you would be out of the will of God if you were living in the street.
And my dad was ministering to poor people. And it's like, I didn't see that as the gospel. I saw that as, oh, those poor people, they don't realize. I'm ashamed of anything in my life. I'm really ashamed of that I had that attitude. Well, then my dad and stepmom said, hey, Cathy, we have this guy you probably heard of. He's going to come stay with us and preach at our church. And here it was Mike. And my stepmom, who's dead now and just had saved my life. She's the most amazing person on the planet to me. She's been dead 20 years, but she loved Mike like a mom and used to make his protein shakes in the morning and when he'd stay with her, and because he used to be a workout fiend. And
Still is.
But that was like probably 25 years ago, maybe even closer to 30. Then he goes on his journey. I follow it. I order his tapes. I'm still so touched by realizing I don't have to, be good to get God to love me, that he loves me because of Jesus. And then we got a hold of a man named John Glenn from Alpha Ministries in Florida, and we went to his church. And he reiterated the same message. In fact, I even got Mike to come down there and preach at his church in Okeechobee. And anyway, we were full on Grace Message. We moved back to Wisconsin to teach the Alpha Series Grace Message. My son gets cancer. Okay. And I am this homeschooled mom who's like kind of out of the box, definitely grace of God, person, but not really unorthodox, but, really started not to believe in hell. Mike started to give that revelation, tentmaker.org, beginning to make sense to me.
Yeah,
that
let me push pause here for a second, Kath, because we are so familiar with these terms.
Yes, but other people aren't.
Right, and so, but you obviously, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the term grace, the grace of God, or his fall from grace. And,
okay.
And first of all, before I get into that, tentmaker.org was Gary Emerald. Gary Emerald may have done more than any other human being in history to decompose the Christian belief of hell. I mean, it basically was his whole ministry, and he just passed away a couple of months ago. Yeah, that's
I know. Right after his wife.
Right
he
after
didn't want to live without his wife.
Yeah, he didn't.
So
Apparently,
precious.
after Michelle passed away. But the word grace does appear in the Bible. It means something, and basically it means God's unconditional acceptance and embrace of you. When we say grace message, the way that Mike started teaching it, and these other people, when they were grace teachers, they would say grace for the believer. You have to believe in order to get this. But what we end up finding out in reading in context under the tutelage of Michael Lilbourne Williams is that grace covers everybody. And when and people will say, well, that's just greasy grace, as if it's such an insult to the finished work. There's nothing greasy about it. It's all-encompassing. It's magnificent. It covers the earth right now. The law was the imposition of these rules and regulations on humanity, specifically directed towards Israel, and then the law was done away with. There is no more sin. You can't sin, you guys. Not as far as God is concerned. There hasn't been a sinner walking on the planet for 2,000 years. The Christianity mantra, we're all born sinners, needing grace. Yeah. Bullshit. We already got the grace.
Yeah, we were born righteous.
The ones that were alive at that time were born sinners needing grace. We are covered in grace. We are fulfilled. We are literally God in the flesh. Everybody. That's
whether we know it or not.
Exactly. That's how God chose it. They say, oh, you're so haughty, thinking yourself God. That was God's choice. I didn't ask for it. He did that. And then the other thing is that the thought that you would do something because you embrace this message, the gospel means something. Another word that means something. It means good news. Right. The way Mike says it is beautiful. There is no bad news in the good news. There's no bad news. You can't sin. And the ironic thing, Kath, is that when people start to know this, as you say, even if you don't know it, but once you start thinking about it and talking about it, like we do a lot on the show, and just in interpersonal discussions. You and I have had private discussions. Owen and I talk about this all the time. You actually find yourself acting a little bit more gracious. And when you hear people say the fall from grace, you can't fall from grace. Not possible. What they're saying is like Jim Baker, the old PTL scandal. This fall from grace. He didn't fall from grace. He just fucked up. He was found to be the corrupt, insecure, immature, religiously bound, twisted-minded, charismatic, money-hungering motherfucker.
And he was bound up in legalism. I can prove it because it's, I will be worthy if I'm, get this million. I will be worthy if I build this building. I will be worthy if. He obviously didn't understand. He was okay.
And now he's doing it all over again after his wife, Tammy Faye Baker, they divorced.
I know.
She dies of cancer. Now, their son, Jay Baker, has come way over towards this way of thinking. I don't think he's quite there yet. I don't know.
I've talked to Jay many times in person. Yep.
And the beautiful thing about Michael's teaching and where he came from is that it encompasses everybody, but it doesn't reject. Far from rejecting God, far from rejecting the creation, far from rejecting the awesomeness of the scriptures. You talked about David cloaking his brother's son. That was a foreshadowing. That was a type. Yeah. That was an allegory, a metaphor. This is how there's thousands of them in the Jewish scripture, thousands. Yeah. And and Jesus himself said, "These scriptures that you hold so dear, they're about me." So again, either he was a corrupt, egomaniacal nut job, or they were about him. We think they were.
Well, that's what doesn't C.S. Lewis say that he's either liar, lunatic, or Lord.
Yeah, and see, he's Lord for everybody. Just like if you're in England, you don't get a choice whether you. If you're in England, you got a Queen of England. You might not recognize her. You might not talk to her. But if you're in England, you got a queen whether you like it or not. Mike realized that. This is how he started gaining freedom, even with Norval Hayes, the freedom to even come out and say that God had healed him from homosexuality when he hadn't.
And for those of you that kind of don't know, just to paint a little bit more of a picture on Mike's story, he was the first person to publicly declare in such a public way that he had been delivered from sexuality and had thus
from homosexuality
from homosexuality, and as a consequence had started this whole pray the gay away movement. Which was really founded in a doctrine where he was convinced, based on what he was being taught, that if he got up on stage and confessed it and believed that he would be actually delivered, and he would get right off stage and then still was wrestling just as much. Oh, I know I'm still but he was being taught. And in those moments where he's, so charismatically preaching and teaching in front of thousands of people and they're cheering and weeping that he had been delivered, that in that moment, I'm sure he had felt a little bit free of
a sense of relief temporarily, but he really tried hard. And he would go and he would confess to guys like Norval Hayes. Hey, Norval, I still got these feelings. And Norval Hayes, sometimes he would be put on the sideline for a little while, but he never really acted upon it too often. But he was married. He had 3 daughters. He's got grandchildren now. But Norval Hayes and the ilk, and many of those names I haven't heard for a long time that you were reiterating, Kathy, was Charles Capps. What a nut job that guy was. Gospel Bill. And anyway, Norval Hayes was just keep confessing because the money was rolling in. Michael was making $50,000 a month in the 70s and early 80s. And then once he accepted the understanding of true grace for everyone, first for himself, and then it eventually evolved to everyone, then not only did he come out, but he explained it to his wife, Hazel. They got divorced. They're best friends. She works for his ministry, and it's a beautiful story. But Michael had gay boys and girls, especially boys, commit suicide because they were saying, or he was saying, God delivered me, but God was not delivering him, and God was not delivering these other gay kids, and that's a tough burden to have to carry. But what are you going to do? I mean, it's but now he's out there. I mean, we know of a young man that a friend of Owen's that just reached out to him just a couple of days ago, and we spoke to him briefly last night. And I mean, he's a Christian boy, and he I heard a level of freedom in his voice. Did you?
Yeah, I really did.
Did you guys see the movie Boy Erased?
No.
Go see it. But anyway, it's about Love in Action Ministries. The whole movie is. And it's about a man who's gay, who's 38 now, and has had a memoir written, Boy Erased, about his stint in Love in Action. And it's all about the director, who's John Smid, who's now out and happily married to his husband. And John is my Facebook friend, and he's been really tortured because this movie comes out all about reparative therapy. That's not who he is now, right? but that is who he was then. And it's heartbreaking because he is responsible in some way for people dying, for people being, committing suicide. And it's heartbreaking,
It is. Listen, at the end, we're all responsible for our own actions.
Yeah.
And we do another long form podcast called Glenn Klein Online. And we just did a show last week just the other day, actually, with Dr. Steve Arkin, whose son Jason committed suicide at Northwestern University. And, people do that. I want to tell you guys something that Michael told me, because I suffer and suffered from clinical depression my whole life until it was diagnosed. I didn't know I had it. And Michael did too, out of this experience of trying not to be gay.
And being told that every time he had a homosexual thought that he was driving a nail through Jesus' feet again.
Right, he was sinning against Jesus again. And that's how he came out genetically. That's just the way that his brain came together. It's just sex, you guys. It's really nobody's business how you enjoy sexual activity. There were societies and habit societies throughout history that sex was sex. People had sex with the same sex. There was no characterizations. There was no LGBTQ, straight, bi, trying to have sex. There was people just because they weren't under the condemnation of Christianity. But we have been since the inception of this country with the Puritans. But I was so depressed. And Michael had tried to commit suicide himself 3 times, hospitalized 6 different times.
Yep.
And so where people were trying to encourage me, come on, Glenn, you're a life coach. You know what to do. Get up. Come on, go for a walk. I mean, in those days, I remember my brother Jimmy said, dude, you're a life coach. Get out of bed and go for a walk. But he didn't understand because Jimmy doesn't suffer from clinical depression.
Yeah.
When Jimmy told me to go for a walk, he might as well have been telling me, you know that rocket ship you built in the backyard? Why don't you go get in that rocket ship and take a trip to the moon to alleviate your depression? But Michael understood, unless you've been depressed like this or know somebody who has been, beautiful humans, you can't relate. It's like me trying to explain to somebody that's never tasted chocolate what chocolate tastes like. You can't do it. You just have to taste it. Then you'll know for yourself. But Michael knew. And I believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I was so depressed I couldn't talk. And Mike called me all concerned one night, and I was in bed. I took the call. I could barely utter a sentence. And he was concerned for me, obviously. And he said, Glenn, I'm going to tell you something. I know the darkness and how sick you are right now. He said, dude, don't do anything that you don't want to do. He didn't tell me to take a walk. He didn't tell me to get in a spaceship. He said, do not do anything that you do not want to do. And then he said, and don't do anything you can't do. He said, but know this. He said, things are going to change. He said they might get better or they might get worse, but they are not going to stay the same. And I knew that to be the truth.
Yeah.
And there's something about hearing something that is universally true, beautiful humans. We all know that the only constant is change. And we also know, if we really think about it, that not everything works together for the good to them that love the Lord. That all things work out for the best. That's bullshit. Sometimes they do work. Oftentimes they do work out. But sometimes they work out horribly.
Well, do you think we can make the best out of things that happen to us?
We can, but that's not a truth. Sometimes we can. Sometimes gravity's the truth. The gospel, the righteousness that everybody has been imparted with is the truth for everybody across the board, regardless.
Yes.
Change is truthful for everybody. We all know we live on a planet and a life that is constantly changing. And somehow, just hearing that, and when you hear the truth, it causes, without any effort at all, I never went even for a walk, but I was propelled emotionally forward. And in those days, going forward for me was just not killing myself. Going forward for me was going to the bathroom. Going forward to me was going to take a shower. So you guys that are suffering from clinical depression, or you know somebody who's suicidal, know this. It's going to change.
Amen.
It may get better. It may get worse. Don't do anything you can't do. Don't feel pressure to do anything that you don't want to do. Just know 2 things. It's going to change, and that you are loved. In fact, you are love. You are perfect love just the way you are. You don't have to do anything, think anything, believe anything, go anywhere, drink, not drink, smoke, drink, or chew, or hang around with girls that do. You don't have to do anything. That's the gospel. Jesus Christ, for God's sakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. I have this little theology in my brain or heart. It's red light, green light theology. So if I hear something and it resonates and my green light goes off, I go with it. If it's a red light, I don't. And it's so funny, the secular things that have made my green light go off and the religious things that have made my red light go off. You know what I mean?
Well,
but it works for me.
I know, and whatever works for you. But we recommend not to spiritualize anything. There is no secular. There is no religious. There is no sacred.
Right,
there is no profane. It's all one. And that's one of the reasons we do the show the way we do it. Because if you can swear and tell a joke about somebody and say, oh, that fucking guy over there, he's God in the flesh too. We can say that fucking God over there. God's not bothered. He's the one that came up with these thoughts of words and syllables and, I mean, language that goes back to the Bible, the Tower of Babel.
And it's interesting when you live your life like this, like you're describing, where everything, you know, where there's no more us and them.
Yes.
You see everybody as righteous and you see yourself as righteous. All of a sudden, this battle I fought in my own self for millions, you know, feels like forever, you know, I don't have a battle anymore. I don't fight my flesh. I was telling my husband, who grew up Lutheran and really wasn't familiar with some of these terms, like fighting your flesh. He was like, what does that mean? I mean, everybody has a flesh. I'm like, oh, I know everybody has the flesh. He goes, no, I mean, everybody has flesh. It's like skin, it's flesh. And I'm like, oh, I thought you meant like flesh. And he goes, what are you talking about? You know, but I wasted so many years of my life fighting and warring against my flesh.
Explain to the beautiful humans what flesh means in Christian terms.
Okay, so it's like your
Christianese
baser nature, your base nature that wants to do the wrong thing.
That basically wants to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's your flesh.
Right. And so you fight against that, even though I would, you know, even as a homeschool mom who did not fantasize about Johnny Depp, I still remember fighting my flesh. Now, what the hell was I fighting? I don't know, maybe it was eating 2 cookies instead of 1. I mean, you know, I don't know. But I know since I've come out of the rule system, this weird thing has happened. I'm not really fighting about anything. Whatever I want to do, I do it.
You know what? Here's what the flesh actually is in the understanding of the new covenant, the new way of thinking. The flesh is the thinking that you could somehow add to your righteousness through not fantasizing about Johnny Depp or eating 2 cookies or not eating 2 cookies. So, so Johnny Depp in your spank bank?
No. It's ironic. So I have to kick you back a little bit. So my husband and I came back here. We left Florida after 7 years, and our son gets cancer, and he's 3 years old.
Right.
And he had brain cancer, and they did a surgery, and they did what they could, and we did all these alternative things, and they said he would die in like 3 months. And so thankfully, I have to say, we came out of the Word of Faith movement already. So I wasn't hung up on, you know, he will be healed, even though a lot of people came to my house and said, if, you know, we believed what you used to believe, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't want to get us too way late, but long story short, he ended up living and he's 26.
Yay.
But,
and you didn't believe.
Not through this really weird series of events. I hesitate. It's not that I don't believe it's a miracle. I don't know, but I know for some reason God allowed, you know, Josiah's still here. But anyway, when he was 4, he died, and he became brain dead. And we wanted him to be an organ donor. So he died in a hospital. And when they med-flight and took his organs, he woke up. And they don't understand it. He tells me that he saw light. I don't know really what happened. Long story short, then he was on life support for 3 years after going through 2 more brain surgeries. And we had nurses in our house for 24/7, and my marriage was very strained. 85% of people that go through that kind of thing get a divorce with a serious illness with a child. And it's, you know, makes a lot of sense. The different ways men and women handle stress. I mean, there's so much to unpack in that. We had nurses in our house, and they were like our family. And, you know, I was always a polite, you know, ever since sexual abuse, again, right? I'm responsible for the happiness of everybody around me and the peace and controlling everything, keeping it fine, you know? And So my husband and I had really lost communication, and I became involved emotionally and stuff with a friend that I had never had a negative thought about or a sexual, bad thought about. And
Or a good thought about, apparently.
Yeah, and basically...
See how you couch that? You called it a bad thought. I'd call it a good thought.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, so it ended up destroying my marriage, okay, because I, became somebody I never thought that I could. And I had an affair. And it was so hard for me to reconcile that because I was that person who would never fantasize about Johnny Depp.
That was your first mistake.
That was my baseline. And then I become this person that just throws it all away. 5 wonderful kids, God does this big miracle for you. Who the hell are you to throw it all away? And it was all on the down low, but then it all ended up surfacing after it was over. And my husband went on for years trying to learn how to forgive me and really couldn't. And we ended up divorcing at 30 years, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, and then I, ended up getting remarried a few years later, and been very happily married. But I learned a lot, and I have to say I'm grateful for that situation because I remember the day my whole sins were made scarlet and everybody knew in my area. And I remember running away with my kids to some really wonderful friend's house, and I couldn't believe the sun came up the next day.
I know.
Like, oh my God, I've sinned this horribly and grieved God, but yet he let the sun come up. Well, first of all, I'm not that important, okay? But second of all, I still believed, even though I had said the narrative of the grace message, and I still thought I was so full of shame, and I realized it had to do with a narrative that had been in my life since I was a little tiny girl, that was embedded in my psyche regarding anything sexually that you needed. And I just realized that I ventured into territory to feel alive because I'd been dead for so long.
And a lot of people do. And unfortunately, they were raised either by families or in a culture that says there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
We have, again, Kelly Elizabeth Goss's show that aired on Friday. And she was raised Southern Baptist. She ended up living as a threesome without guilt or without much guilt. We talked to her about her guilt. But I would be remiss, Kath, to make sure that our listeners understand that our guests are free to say anything they want to say and to think anything they want to say and believe anything they want to say or believe. I would not articulate what's your son's name?
Josiah.
Josiah. I would not articulate what happened to Josiah, or if the incredible things that happened to my children, life-threatening things that they survived, as miracles, or that God somehow did something, or they were special in any way, shape, or form. Crazy stuff happens. Wonderful things happen. Tragedies. It's called life. It's just the happenstance of life. God isn't doing that stuff anymore, you guys. And we've been talking in such wonderful terms about Mike Williams. Once Michael understood, he's the one that taught me what I just said, basically.
Yeah.
He told God one time, he said, God, if you're ever thinking about doing a miracle for me and healing me of something, don't do it, because I won't tell anybody. Because what happens when we say that was miraculous, or that was God's blessing, or God's hand was on the situation, and God's hand seemingly wasn't on your neighbors or the other kid that died of brain cancer or the house that just got blown away from the hurricane when yours didn't, that's fucked up. And that is
it makes God a respecter of persons.
Yes, and God
says he's not.
And he's not doing that stuff anymore. It's the old economy.
Well, it is heartbreaking because I have done funerals I do funerals and weddings, and I did a funeral for a mama who's an atheist whose 3-year-old baby died of the same brain cancer, having the same surgeon that saved my son's life. And there I am. And I'm usually really good at funerals. I'd rather do funerals and weddings any day. And I don't have a problem connecting with my audience, and I'm always there and present. But there she was. And I ended up just sobbing through that whole funeral because I had survivor guilt. And there's no way I can say, God did this for me, but he didn't do it for you.
Yeah,
There's no way.
Yeah, no,
There's no way.
But you kind of did say it a little bit. Maybe you still think it a little bit. And I stay with.
I just people paraphrase it as this really weird supernatural thing, and I just figure I feel like Josiah knows when he was 9, he was at the funeral of a little boy who died that he had played with and prayed with, and of a brain tumor, and he said, "Mama, do you remember when it was I was going to die, but it wasn't my turn yet?" And to me, that's kind of where I put it in a box.
It's just
like
it's life. There's some things are just unexplainable. My grandson Connor was born on August 29th, dead. And through the modern technology and a lot of luck and skill, he's doing amazing now. But there were other kids that died in the hospital that day. Yeah. I don't know why. It wasn't God, though, you guys. That I can promise you. And like I know that I'm talking on the internet right now. I can promise.
I see that, but if I would say, yeah, you're right, Glenn, people would say, oh my God, it's terrible what God did for you and you didn't listen, or you don't attribute that, or you're not.
Well, fuck what people think. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
So I don't know
like
what it is.
I'll tell you, I stumbled to a saying that people understand. When people die and loved ones go, and you want to convey your condolences for somebody, and people don't know what to say because they're so uncomfortable with death. It is obviously the final goodbye, and it blows. So somebody will say something on Facebook about somebody passing, and here come the comments. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know just how you feel. My dad died last year. Thoughts and prayers. We're praying for you. That's not what people want to hear or need to hear. It might soften it a little bit, but I literally just stumbled on this saying when people go through this kind of tragedy. I just say that so sucks, and I just tell them you're being lots of love your way, which I know is happening because it love's in their heart. They are love, and if there's anything anybody that goes through a massive tragedy or a more minor tragedy, the one thing that they all can relate to is that fucking sucks. Yeah. And how I found this out, I literally just stumbled on this. How powerful it is. I had a acquaintance, a business associate whose daughter committed suicide. And I sent her a card, and in the card I said, Pat, life sometimes really sucks, and this is one of those times. This really sucks. I love you. Lots of love your way. And another associate that was in our business networking group went to the funeral of this woman that had been in business locally for a long time, 30 years. A lot of people there. And this woman, Linda, a friend of mine, a colleague, she gave Pat a hug. And I didn't go to the funeral. And for some reason, she told Linda, please tell Glenn how much that card meant to me. Now think about that. All the people she must have been dealing with the day of her daughter's funeral. And that's the thing. Because you know what? When tragedy hits and when the life's trials and tribulations come, when the storms of life come up, and it does, and they do, it sucks. But here's the good news, is that with a clear understanding, as clear as we can get, of our relationship with God and with each other, we know that was not divinely ordained or inspired. That means you can take responsibility for your own actions, responsibility for your own attitudes, and convey the kind of compassion and love towards other people, regardless of what they believe. And you will never think, well, they were in sin, so that's why that shit happened to them. Yeah. That's good preaching, Roberts, right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Amen.
Well, Kath, it's been unbelievably great to have you. This wasn't so bad, was it?
No, thank you for not asking me about like female ejaculation.
Well, no, we'll talk.
I didn't want to talk about that.
Well, we'll talk about that next time.
Maybe you need to talk about
that. That's a good radio tease right there. We'll do that next time.
No. Yeah, that could be for someone else to discuss.
Well, just thank you for the time. We'll do it again. And love to everybody there in the Badger State. We love you too. And love to David Smalley. And we will talk to you soon.
All right.
There she goes. Cathy Taylor.
Wow.
The Red Door Bar Church.
Wow.
Pretty good stuff.
That was a powerful one.
Name of my sex tape.
I'm blown away. Mike was making $50,000 a month doing this.
Yeah.
And he gave all of that up just for the truth, just to know, for the integrity.
Just how it worked out. He didn't go back for the money, as I do know some people who have. We were talking about
Right.
an old friend of mine today who came out through the gospel revolution and went back just because he couldn't make a living. And he was a great worship leader, so he went back and it was, it's an entertainment. It's a show.
Yeah.
It's a shit show, is what it is. Well, thank you. We this is a little longer than we normally go, but Cathy Taylor's got a great story, and we did not hear about her female ejaculation.
Surprise! I think this is a Sex in the Pews first.
Always happy to hear about that, and everything that you bring your way or bring our way through sexinthepews.com. Again, go to all the frickin' platforms and tell people and subscribe. And what else can they do?
I'm actually thinking about sending this one to my mom. This one's actually maybe PG-13 instead of the X-rated editions that we usually put out.
Well, your mom has been a big fan already, dude.
Yeah,
so
who knows? Love you, Mom, if you're watching.
Maybe we should send this to Don Barris Bartlett. Make its way back up the food chain.
You're going to get kicked for saying his name.
Oh, well. It's a naughty boy I am. But
Find us on Instagram at Sex in the Pews. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, everywhere. Sexinthepews.com. Dick Pic of the Week contest. Send us your dick pics, which is not pictures of penises, but pictures of famous dicks.
Like Richards.
Like Richards.
Like Richard Dick Burton.
Right.
Dick Cheney, the former vice president.
We got Splinters t-shirts that those are being given away for the winner of. And please give us a rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Those really help us. And we hope you appreciated all of this life-giving gospel and freedom and feel a little bit more sexually liberated and set free from the bondage of religious oppression.
Amen, brother. Big O, what shit did we learn today?
I learned some shit today. I learned that Cathy wanted to come before Jesus did.
Yeah, she wanted to have sexual intercourse before Jesus came back. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 20. It was a long story, and I've already shared some of it, and we'll share more over time. But I was petrified that I was going to die. This is before I became a believer. That I was going to die without experiencing intercourse. And then I experienced it, and I was like, I'm so glad. It was so good. Hope I'm not creeping Tyler out there. What shit did I learn today?
Today, you learned that... Oh, shit, I was going to give you this one. You learned that... All right, you take Cathy's. Yours is going to be that Cathy wanted to come before Jesus.
All right, I'll take that one.
I learned that you prayed on a handkerchief and threw it to your congregation, and people fell.
Like
after.
cordwood.
Like cordwood. I don't even know what cordwood is.
That's, like you stack up wood. They call it cordwood. Like you stack up wood for the winter. That's cordwood.
Well, Florida boy doesn't know anything about that.
Owen Pratt learned what cordwood is today, ladies and gentlemen. That's a beautiful thing. Well, we will do it all again next time. Thank you so much for joining us. We love you. And until next time, this is Glenn Klein.
And Owen Pratt
saying, Shalom, everybody.
Bitches.